Hey, TEC family, welcome to season 6. My name is Benita G. I'm the Education Concierge. You know what time it is. It's time for our podcast. Season 6, we bumped it up. We stepped it up. We got it ready. I'm going across the nations, digging in, pounding the DMs professionally to get people on the podcast so we can have conversations about education. I have on today Brandon White from Unbound. He's going to tell us about the foolishness of education, how he got in education, how it has transitioned to where he is, but how he also disrupts, but then he designs for success for educators and students. So pull up a chair, don't slow down, put it on in the car. I know while you're working out, listen to this podcast to be encouraged, but also be engaged because we don't just want to talk about it. We want to be about it. All right. So thank you so much, Brandon, for joining in. Can you tell us who you are and what you do to disrupt the foolishness?
Yeah, thank you, Benita. And thank you. I really appreciate that intro. I got a lot to learn from that intro whenever I do my own podcast, and I'd be going on and on, but that was clear and to the point, and I just appreciate it. So my name is Brandon White. I'm from Rochester, New York. That's like an hour to the right of Buffalo. I got into education. If I, had to start from the beginning, it was, my parents valued education, modeling it more than like talking about it. They certainly talked about it, but they definitely modeled it with, their careers. My father's a lawyer, my mother's a librarian. So, education is very important for both of those professions, obviously. And then I would say by the time I got into high school, hip hop culture became really important in my life, and quiet is kept. Hip hop culture provided my education, and it supported my schooling because schooling and education are two different things. But I was able to bring in my education from what I was getting, in my hip hop community and in my hip hop culture, and tie it into whatever was going on in the school to make sense of whatever was going on, whether it was to actually understand the information or decode the information in the system. And I saw value in that process. And so I said, I want to be an educator. And so I became an educator, taught middle school English in the Rochester City School District, loved it, had a great time, despite how crazy and dysfunctional the system can be. I still really enjoyed my job. And then I spent some time as a coordinator for restorative practices in that school building. And then from there, I got an opportunity to work for Unbound Ed as an ELA specialist, was able to learn a lot and do a lot through that organization. And now I'm transitioning into being a full-time consultant. So it's a big season of change for me. And I just started my doctoral program last week. So big season of change.
Congratulations on starting your doctoral. That is huge. I just got in trouble last week because my friends and family were like, what you doing? I was like, I don't have no money. I'm glad you said that because that gave me some more encouragement to go ahead and handle what I need to handle. But I love, shout out to all the middle school ELA teachers. We represent, don't.
That's right.
All the middle school ELA teachers know, and we are the ones for you not to come for. How about that?
That's right. Yeah.
So thank you.
I was gonna say I can't count many times I told people that that's what I do, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, how could and they're like, wait, hold up, hold up." Middle school is a very precious and awesome age, especially if you provide structure and you keep it authentic and you make the word meaningful. It's a great age to teach.
I love
to keep you entertained, to keep you reflective, and they really appreciate the structure you give them if you provide it for them. So, yeah. But I be having to check people. I'm like, wait, that's not how we roll, So
I'm glad you said that because I always get thoughts and prayers. I'm like, what?
Yep.
Okay, I know where I am. I'm choosing.
Yeah, that's right.
To be in this space, but you were right. Once you do that relationship building, set that structure, and the kids know you're genuine.
Yeah.
I mean, they're gonna be kids. I got some delays. Hold on.
I
Okay,
got some
there I
sweat
am.
on my
Okay.
glasses.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
sweating like TD Jakes out here. This is
Wait up.
crazy.
Get ready, get ready, get ready.
Oh.
We're gonna end that.
Oh man.
Okay, let me focus. Okay. So
That's the problem with the glasses. Like, it's just if it's hot enough, like they'll steam up. So I might do that a couple more times. Already, look at this. It's crazy.
every time I walk out of Publix.
Oh man. I might even have to take these off. This is crazy. But then I can't see. But yeah, yeah. But I digress. My bad.
I put my contacts in today, but I feel you. I got you.
Yeah.
Okay, now we acting like our middle schoolers.
Right. No, for real. They do teach you to stay young and have fun. That's a fact.
Oh God. Then we'll get off track. And I'll be like, okay, well, tomorrow we're gonna pick up with Shakespeare again because we talked about LL Cool J and who is Houdini, the whole class.
Right. Yeah. That's one of the things I really appreciated when you have the structure and you have the authenticity. Tangents aren't always tangents. Like they're intergenerational moments of like cultural exchange, or they can be. Right. And that's just if you ask me, and yes, you need to provide the instruction you need to provide. Yes, you need to give them the skills that you're trained to give them. But a part of that is also making the connections you can. Because if you end up talking about like Houdini and LL to, today's 13-year-olds, right? Like, and comparing the similarities and differences of, today's artists, that provides more space for more background knowledge to connect to other things that y'all learn about. Right. Like, and background knowledge is really key and important in ELA instruction. So yeah. That's highly valuable. And I loved doing stuff like that all the time, but it was time to transition and do something new.
So then tell me, how was the transition? Like, how did you know? And I want to preface this by saying, everyone that transitioned is not transitioned because of horrible experience. Okay.
Yeah. That's a good point.
What's next? I've done this. I've handled this space that I was given. I've worked in this entity. Well, what's next for me in this education field? So how did you know it was time to transition? And then what did you do mentally? Because I feel like that's been the biggest thing for me, mentally and financially, to transition out of the traditional classroom building, but still staying in education.
Yeah. So for me, if I'm being honest, I think I was more tired than I realized, and I didn't realize it until after I made the transition. But it wasn't necessarily a situation where I was like, I don't like the kids, or I don't even like the adults I work with. I loved my school community. And so, but the opportunity was to join Unbounded through what they call like a diversity residency program. So basically plucking people who've been in school buildings to get exposure to like the nonprofit like education world of professional development, learn some things along the way, help people learn things along the way, in a way that's like equity driven and centered. So I was like, this sounds like a good opportunity. And it was a good opportunity to get back into content, because I stepped away from content for a second to do restorative practices. And it reminded me of how much I really appreciated content. And so, I applied, got in, and for me, it was important to not have fear of something new, particularly like the security of teaching, particularly in New York State. I know that a lot of other places aren't like this, but there's a lot of security in teaching in New York State in terms of New York State retirement system and whatever other like investments you can make to, secure your retirement and live decently after retirement. I had to not be afraid of, like potentially leaving financial security when there's a cosmic security and doing something that I'm supposed to be doing, even if it's different. So I had to really lean into that. And then I also had to lean into the fact that this new job was not going to be as regimented and as structured as teaching. right? Because I didn't, I knew I was going to need a plan. And even my principal told me, like, but you're going to be working because most of it's working from home. You're going to be working from home. Brandon, I'm happy for you, but you don't need a plan, man. Like, because she knew me and she knew like my propensity to get like, just all over the place, right? So I was preparing myself for that, but like hitting this job made me realize like, like I really benefited from a school structure, like periods. This is what happened in this period. This is what happened in this block. This is what happened. I really benefited from that. And so I really needed to make sure that, I became a more of an organized person, and mixed results, but I did, take that seriously. And one thing I wish I was prepared for a little bit more that I wasn't prepared for was imposter syndrome. This, because I ended up being around, like I came from being in a school building where I was like I was a valued professional. And now I'm in this situation where everybody in the room are like saying concepts and words and resources and instructional moves that I'm not familiar with, different frameworks and philosophies that I'm not familiar with. And it was just like, it was a big step back. Organizations I had no idea existed. And like, it was just like, I was taken aback some. And it took some time to get like, recalibrated and understand like just because they're saying something that you didn't know doesn't mean that you don't have things that they don't know and that you can't learn them. And you being a learner doesn't necessarily, produce less value. So, it took some time to get into that space, but those are things I had to either anticipate or I wish I had anticipated a little more.
I love that, but I especially love what you just said about imposter syndrome. Even though I'm still hearing stuff I don't know, I'm still learning. But even within what I have, I'm here because I have something valuable to offer. Yes. And that's why you were there. That's why you were chosen. That's why you were picked among how many ever. And I know it's probably a lot of applicants for a position like this. So going from there, and I was sitting here when you were talking about it now, and I was thinking, I was like, do I have imposter syndrome? I think I have. I think I had that when I went away to college and walked into a classroom at the university. And when the professor asked the question, all of us raised our hands. And I was like, oh, so we all smart. And so I think that was my first time with imposter syndrome. And I think it was exactly what you said. I learned immediately that you're from the West Coast, you're from the Mid-South, you're from Chicago, I'm from Virginia. Okay, so how do we combine all of this so that now when we walk away, we all have more?
Yeah, that's right.
We all know more. So I love that you said that. Thank you. Because it like wrapped it up for me. I was like, oh yeah, that's what we did. Because we were all looking around each other like, you know how you introduce yourself the first day of college and you're like, my name is so-and-so and I graduated, magna cum laude.
Right.
I just graduated. Like I was I'm here, like whatever.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so we're gonna move on. So what we do is I want you to talk about what you do now for Unbound and what it is, and then how is it? Because I love the part about the professional development. I love some good professional development. If it's terrible, I'm gonna walk out like at church. But if it's good, I love it because I can network and I can do all the things. So talk about your position, your previous position and the one you're transitioning into now at Unbound, because I want educators to understand that there are other ways we can still be in education and how is it beneficial to you? Because you said something else that's key to me, like I needed that structure. And just like you, my friends are like, get a planner. And I always had a planner, but they were like, block your time because girl, you'll be, I'll sit here and create a whole social media, content creating. I'm supposed to be, in a podcast. So I just to that. But let's talk about Unbound Ed. and what you do there and what you're transitioning into, because I am excited about it.
Yeah, so at Unbounded, I was an ELA specialist, which involved like the creation and revision of professional development materials, particularly for our offerings like Standards Institute, which is like a week-long, very immersive conference, and then also other kind of professional development experiences like virtual, like brief 2-day summits and even some in-person summits. And then there's like a cohort program they do to train school building leaders and system level leaders on how to best implement, aligned curriculum in a way that's that's equity driven, and in a way that's like what we call GLEAM, grade level, engaging, affirming, and meaningful, which is like our framework for cultural responsiveness. But I knew it was another time to transition, and so which involved this doctoral program that I just started. So what I'm doing now is primarily focusing on thought leadership for the organization, like primarily through podcasting, like you, right? And so I run a podcast called the LP Literature and Practice, where we basically interview an author of a book, an education-centered book that kind of promotes equitable instruction. We talk about the book and just have a good time through that. And so I focus on promoting that. Well, creating the content for that, promoting that. Also, I'll be doing more thought leadership kind of pieces around that and introducing more ideas from Unbounded's platform in order to do two things. One, help people see that Unbounded is a worthwhile organization to invest your professional development in, but then also two, to bring people in whose ideas may help us be better at what we do. Because again, it's a reciprocal thing, right? So yeah, that's what I'm doing. And I think I answered your question. I feel like I'm missing a part around like what caused the transition. I think I just knew it was time to do something new and different. And as a consultant, because that's right, you had brought up like how more teachers need to understand the wide variety of ways you can be in education. I encourage every single teacher who has taught more than, I'll start with 10, maybe 10 years, anywhere between 5 and 10, depending on your situation. I'd encourage any teacher who has taught in the classroom or has worked in school building for 5 to 10 years to find a job. And if they're feeling it and they're feeling like burnt, and if they're feeling like exhausted, or they're tired of the system's dysfunctions, or even if they're tired of some of the children's behavior, I don't know what you might be tired of, but you love your job, you love education, there are options for you. Whether it is, and I would suggest I just had a conversation this summer with somebody I used to work with. If you go on LinkedIn, there are opportunities for curriculum editors, curriculum writers, professional development organizations like Unbounded, right? There's just so many different, even like, blog writers, right, for education organizations, right? Like there are so, and granted, they may not have the retirement plans that, and the benefit packages that, our systems may have, but in the long run, it may be more beneficial for you to be able to step away, even if it's for a short amount of time and you want to go back and do work on it from a different angle. Because being a classroom teacher in some of our environments is not a sustainable thing. It's not always sustainable to do that job for 25 years, 20 years, 15 years, 10 years straight. Because of everything that can go on, depending on your district and your network. So I would encourage educators, classroom educators who are going through it, to find a job, even if it means that you just step away for like a year or two, and who knows, you may end up finding something that you're better at. And that's another thing. Some of us aren't meant to be in the classroom. But like that's the narrative of like, if you're an educator, you got to go in the classroom, and then you got to work up the systems from a classroom if you want to do something different. Like, no, some of us are really important, can be really important education researchers. Some of us can be really important education journalists. Some of us can be really important education curriculum writers, right? Like there's a lot of different jobs. And so I think once that awareness builds up, we'll be able to I guess have an even more even distribution of effectiveness, and people's mental health, I think, will be better too. So, yeah.
So we might well stop now. I mean, so thank you. So thank you, because it is important. And I know I started teaching in 1998. Back in the 1900s, as my students would say. And you're right. That traditionally was, you start teaching, you get promoted, or you become department chair or team lead, and then you do you over summer school, and then you in the back then we didn't really have like principal training things like there are now, and then you became like the AP or you became like the administrator for 8th grade group, or whatever they wanted to do, and then you went up. And I was one of those people that was like, I have no desire to be in administration. Like, y'all crazy.
Yeah.
No. So I did, and you're right. That made me start looking at. I didn't know there were educational researchers. I didn't understand what curriculum writing was. I didn't know. And then I started going to conferences, and I started meeting other people. I'm like, oh no, I only stayed in the classroom 5 years, but I didn't want to do administration like you. So now I work over here for Pearson, or I work over here for Unbound, or I'm over here. I'm running City Year, and I'm like, what? And so I think is what you said, like exposure and understanding that you may need to take a break. And in all honesty, y'all, I took like several breaks. I was a former military spouse. When you move overseas, Department of Defense Education Activity does not hire military spouses quickly, because we only stay 2 years. So I was an aide. I worked at the Navy Exchange. Like, I took breaks from the classroom, and I did work in those environments where I'm so thankful, because I worked in Title I. I was a turnaround specialist. So taking those breaks made me be able to stay for 25 years. Because I think if I had never had those breaks, I would have left a year 12,
that's
a year
important.
15. So that's important. So thank you for sharing with us. So you transition, and I like the fact that you were like, I just realized it was time, what's next? Like, oh, okay, now I'm in this doctorate program. I need to adjust my lifestyle here, still in education, but let me transition. And how can I build this around my doctorate? And shout out to your podcast. I do love it. I listen to it.
Oh, thank you so much.
I'm like sharing it. I'm like, oh, I listen to this. I'm on LinkedIn.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate this so much, Benita, for real. That means a lot. Especially I'm trying to, bring it up. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is essential. It is important. Once again, y'all, listen to these podcasts when you're driving in the car, like Saturday morning when you're cleaning. Yes, I'm a Christian. I know I'm supposed to be playing my good gospel music, and I do play it. But sometimes on Saturdays, I literally like, you know what? We're not gonna cut the TV on until like tonight for the game, or later on. Yeah. Like I'm gonna try and cut the TV on when they do the 12 o'clock when they talk about the college games. All morning, I'm going to listen to podcasts. One, it's feeding me in my profession. Like I am learning while I'm washing these dishes, while I'm scrubbing these baseboards, because I'm a country girl. So thank you so much. And thank you for seeing the need. Now, we're going to transition into what we talk about here is the controversial corner. I love it.
Okay.
And I've been sitting here because I'm like, it's a lot. It's a lot to talk about. It's a lot. So, but I want, there are 2 things in my head. I'm like, I'm trying to go back and forth, but this is the one I want to talk about. You spoke about it because this is something that you did. It's something you were in charge of. And now we're hearing some backlash behind it. And I want to talk about restorative practices or restorative justice.
Yes.
I'm very aware of it. I've been trained in it. I've used aspects of it in different schools. I've been in schools. I'm like, this is completely wrong. Let's fix this. I don't know. But as we move forward with the new generation, Gen A, is that what they are?
Alpha, this one has,
Generation Alpha, we move forward. And as we see still 7% of BIPOC teachers in the classroom.
Well, you
How
said,
do
I'm sorry, I
we
missed that. You said 7% of what?
7% of BAPOC teachers in the classroom. So 7%
Okay.
of the teachers, even though it's like 80% of the students,
Right.
we still have 7%. How do we transition to Generation Alpha? And with the teacher shortage, period, how do we still get that restorative practice in appropriately? Because when it is done appropriately, it changes lives. Like literally,
Mm-hmm.
teachers understand how not to be triggered.
Mm-hmm.
Parents understand how not to trigger and how to communicate. Everyone understands how to communicate effectively, which a lot of the times when we dig deep, that's the first base. Like we didn't
Yes,
understand how to communicate effectively. And then we learn how to listen to hear.
that's right.
And so how do we move into the next generation? We know we have a problem with socialization.
Yes. That's a really hard question. And I don't know if I'm gonna have a complete answer, but
That's
I
okay.
guess I think some of my initial thinking is if any generation needed it, it's this one, right? Like the the socialization piece that clearly like COVID has left a legacy, left a health legacy, a mental health legacy on everybody. But then, like most things, the kids are impacted the most. And I don't know if there's a district in this country that would disagree with that, right? Objectively speaking. And I know a lot of districts have talked a lot about like social emotional learning supports. That's a whole other challenge around making a thing and making it real, making it like well integrated into whatever you're learning or in your school systems. But restorative practices has to be included in that, because the intentional reflection of like the whys behind your choices, and then the intentional steps forward to change that or continue it if you were doing the most productive thing, is, to your point, life-changing. Like there were students that I would interact with regularly in terms of like having conflict resolution circles, designed in the restorative practices way, that like by the time they graduated, they were like straight up different kids.
Yeah.
No, that's the power of restorative practice. They're the same people, but just evolved. Right. And you can tell that there's a level of self-awareness, and they're able to hit the cancel button and swap out behaviors when it's not beneficial. And there's just a level of maturity while they're still their same selves. Because a lot of times, like, I feel like education tries to correct student behavior in a way that tries to change student identity. But what restorative practices does is it tries to, redress negative student behavior in context of student identity, right? And so I saw a lot of kids really be more what's the word, self-actualized through that process. And some of these kids were far out in terms of like emotional evenness, in terms of being able to make good decisions around like socializing with others and prioritizing how they learn. And so I think that that's needed more than ever. And that could potentially look like, because what they did in my building was like they took me out the classroom to worry about that full time. And so teachers who are willing or able would do one of two things. Either A, if they know their student has a conflict, and what will historically happen is the conflict would brew, throughout the periods, and then there might be a fight later on, or there might be some drama later on in social media. They send the student and the students involved to me, and we do a circle or series of circles as necessary. Or teachers allow for me to do an academic / like social emotional circle. Like we read books like I don't know if you're familiar with that book, Yummy. It's like a graphic novel about like a kid who ended up killing there was a kid on Facebook that tagged me, like something about Yummy Sandiford came up. He was like, oh, I remember we met this with Mr. White. Like this is like a couple of weeks ago. Right. Like, so it was like a social motion, but still kind of academic circle. Right. And then what's important is to do more circles that don't have to do with conflict, that have to do with relationship building. So there was like, I teamed up with the school psychologist to like select kids who would best benefit from that. And so, like, I think really that was important then. And this was like 2016, 2017. That's more important now to create systems or microsystems in our schools where we're able to identify kids who really would benefit from that. And then, shuffle your staffing around, whether I don't know how many systems have like teachers on assignment kind of roles, but like, leverage that as best as you can, or having like a morning, like in homeroom, you're able to touch base like that, like, but figuring things out because we need this and things like it more than ever.
I thank you. And I'll even include advisory. Shout out to my old school in Memphis. My advisory team, which would include leadership and teachers. That's where we did a lot of our relationship building. It was I appreciated that they tried to do students that we did not teach. So I would have a group of kids that were not my regular ELA students, even though some 2 or 3 slipped in there and I just let them stay.
Yeah.
But it was important. We actually lost a student to gun violence, and it was like the kids in your advisory were like connecting with me, and even though I'm here in Miami now, they still have my Google Voice number, and they were, did you hear this happen? And I was like, what y'all talking about? And the students actually told me as the principals were trying to get the emails ready, which I understood what was happening. You have to do things accordingly, and administration has to make sure they have to get the facts. But of course, the students are in the community, and it was that relationship building because we were all distraught. Y'all just graduated like 3 weeks ago from 8th grade. We this summer, but I had to remind them, and I was like, remember, every Friday I would say to y'all, be careful, know where you are, don't go anywhere by yourself. Parents check on you not because they nosy; it's a safety thing.
Yes.
I want to know where you are. And all of that came just out of our advisory circle. And I love what you said. Like some of it was preventative. Like, I would call an APN and be like, hey, so what I'm hearing, close the door. So what I heard was a word is that there's, something on social media. And sometimes the kids will send it to me and I'll be like, no, don't send it.
Yep. No, that's real. Yep.
But then I also, like you say, you want to build that trust, you want to build that relationship, and you want to just come into that class. I love that you use Yummy. I never even thought about that.
Yeah. It was a short book, right? Yeah. So it made it easier to like have a circle and talk about it.
Yeah, I'm down here in banned book world. But because I'm a private school and I work with homeschool parents, those students are any child is a child. They still need socialization. All right, so we're gonna keep it going. We're getting ready to wrap up because my editor this year told me that I've been going on too long. So
hey, mine too. Mine's saying the same thing. Season 2, I gotta shorten things up. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So we're getting ready to wrap up. So what we're going to talk about now is my friends call me the Education Concierge because back in the 1900s, thank you. Back in the day, you would check in with your family, your spouse, your significant other, your partner, and you would check into this wonderful hotel because you had saved up because we don't teach a salary. Yeah. Hold on one second. My Mac is like, well, I'm gonna go to sleep if you don't plug me in. Okay, reset. All right, you would check into this beautiful hotel and you would go in and everything's fine in your book, but you guys would say, you know what? We didn't really do an itinerary. So let's go to the concierge. And so you go to the concierge. And so my question to you is, you go to the concierge. Can you tell me where you would be, what country, what city, and what are you going to ask the concierge for reservations? Do you want Broadway and what show? Do you want a Michelin star restaurant? And what type of restaurant is it? So I'm going to ask you, where would you want to go? Anywhere in the world. And we are talking, let's think back before COVID restrictions. And money is no object. So you got the black AMX card.
Okay. Oh, that's a good one. I would say me and the missus would go to, man, that's hard. Okay. That is really challenging. I would say maybe Brazil. Go to Brazil, find a good, if this exists, find in Brazil somewhere, maybe like Rio de Janeiro, maybe exists there. Find a good Afro-Latino vegan spot, plant-based spot to eat at. Because yeah. If it's a big place like Rio, I'd imagine, and stay in a hotel that's also very, I guess, like eco-friendly, where like it's modern, but it's still like very like set up in a way that's like more connected with the environment as opposed to just like, just obstructing the environment. And trying to think what else. And it will probably involve some free range walking around in places and spaces that make sense to do that. But then also maybe like a structured history tour of like, of Brazil and a place like that. So that would be a good one, I think.
I love that. And once again, no guest has said the same thing or gone to the
really?
same place.
Okay.
And it gives us, your TEC family, insight into who you are. So are you vegan?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I haven't been a great one lately, but I am.
Look, I'm pescatarian, and I'm gonna tell you that my daddy made some oxtails, and I ate it. These my daddy oxtails, so
right.
And some gravy and some bread. Okay, so I love that because now we know more about you, just a little bit personally. You and the missus, vegan, nature. Still luxury, because you can still do luxury and nature at the same time. And environmental, let's tour. Let's just go walking it safely, but also let's take a historical tour. So a little bit of both. I love that. So thank you for sharing a little bit about your trip. Anybody out there, Brandon White and his missus, would like a vacation to Brazil, Rio, anywhere out there, and we need a great restaurant. I'm gonna look. I'm always watching Food Network, or I'm always on YouTube watching the food something. So when I find love, she be like, "This is the restaurant.
This is it. When you go, check this out."
We got a book on the flight.
Yeah.
All right, so we're getting ready to wrap up. So the way we wrap up here is, I'm a good old country girl from Lawrenceville, Virginia, but I went to church.
Okay.
And Little Shallow Baptist Church on Otterdam Road in Emporia, Virginia. Okay? All right.
Okay.
And I am the main pastor. I've already opened the doors of the church because it's revival.
Oh, wow.
And you are the guest pastor. So your job is to close us out however you see fit. So that's what I'm going to ask you to do. But before you do that, tell the TEC family how we can get connected with you. How can we ask you to come in and consult? How can you come in and do a conference, and or they have a book? How can they send you the book so they can be a possible guest on your podcast?
Thank you for that space. That really means a lot. One, if you want to reach out for me consulting, you can reach out to me at bwhite@mayaclaude.com, MAYACLAUDE.com. That's the name of my consulting LLC, Maya Claude Teaching and Learning. I named it after Maya Angelou and Claude McKay, like two of my favorite poets. So it's got to be called something. Let me just call it that. And if you are interested in being a podcast guest, you have a book, old or new, that is like related to, supporting or delivering equitable instruction, please email me at brandon.white@unbounded.org. And to close us out, and that makes it, now I know a little bit more about you and things are starting to make more sense. Because if you're saying that, you opened up a church, and you're saying that you opened up a micro school, all that's reminding me of like a lot of because I also did another podcast series called The Complexion of Teaching and Learning, which talk about like the historical practices and experiences of educators of color in America. And a lot of, particularly African Americans, we talked about Native American, Asian, Latino, but in African American history, a lot of our education was, of course, like associated with freedom. And then the practice was like oftentimes doing it in churches or small micro schools, because those were the means, right? And in a lot of ways, and a lot of times, that was us at our most professionally effective. We weren't supported by the state, and we needed that, of course, our states. But the idea of like communal literacy that Jarvis Gibbons talks about, and just like the intentionality of like of how important education was, and particularly in the South, right? Yeah. And sometimes the South doesn't get its due in terms of like education, and the perspective is like not always, or the stereotypes aren't always good. But like, if it wasn't for the South and doing the things that you're doing right now, back then, like Black education probably wouldn't even be a thing. So I will close by saying that sometimes we have to, our orientation around what education is has to go back to what you're doing now, and what our ancestors did before, which is we were doing this irrespective of a system, right? Like, not being afraid to part ways with a system is something that we really have to meditate on and consider to be serious business. I'm not saying we always have to do that, like everybody has to break away from this. I'm not saying that, but I think that if we're going to own our success and make sure that it happens, like hyper dependency on a system, even if it gives us some really important things like identity and benefits, is something that we can't over depend on. Like, and so tapping back into the legacies that we come from, like the one that you're actively operating in now, it's going to be really important if we're going to find success for our kids.
Thank you so much. Look, if you were online, we're going to give you the line name of Fearless Transition, because that's what you are. Like you're like, look, I'm going to do this. This is position I need to be in. I'm just going to walk into it. And I grew up in a church enough. We had a pastor who would always say, your gifts make room for you. And that's what I see. When you start speaking, I'm like, your gifts are making room for you. And we, the rest of society, appreciate you not being scared. And thank you for walking into it. Thank you for your family, for giving this time and space for you to come on and share with your new family, the TEC family. You. All right, y'all, season 6. I told you I was going to bring it. So look, share, subscribe, support. I'm going to put all of Brandon's information in our show notes. And when we post this online, don't forget to join us on YouTube and Anchor by Spotify by Anchor. Anchor, Spotify, they done join forces. And look, we're going to see you on these education streets, because these streets are not for the weary, and they're not for the weak.
Nope. Yes.
We'll see y'all next time. Thank you. Bye.
No, thank you.